They say that after 38 years in social services, you develop a second sight. You don't just see a house. You see the hairline fractures in a family's foundation. You notice the way a child looks at their parents, not with love, but with a careful, measured calculation of the exit routes. I've walked into 1,000-square-foot mansions where the air felt thinner than a prison cell, and I've sat in studio apartments where the warmth could keep you through a blizzard. I thought I'd seen every way a human being could break another. I thought I was retired from all that. My name is Elmer Stanley. At 64, I figured my life's work was done. I lived in a modest one-bedroom near the Lloyd District in Portland, spending my days in a haze of sawdust and wood stain. Restoring mid-century furniture was my therapy. There's something honest about wood. If you strip away enough layers of old, ugly paint, you eventually find the truth of the grain underneath. I wish people were that simple. My son, Dennis, was the one piece of work I could never quite finish. He's 36 now, a high-level sales manager for a tech firm, making the kind of money that buys you a sanitized life in the suburbs. We hadn't been close for years, not since he married Trisha. Trisha is a professional lifestyle curator. That's what she calls herself on Instagram, where 47,000 strangers watch her eat avocado toast and talk about intentional living. To me, she always looked like a mannequin brought to life by a very expensive curse. Everything in their world had to be an aesthetic. Their house on Cedar Hill Drive was a monument to the color gray, sterile, expensive, and completely devoid of soul. I hadn't set foot in that house for 18 months. Every time I suggested a visit, Dennis had an excuse. They were traveling for a brand activation, or they were deep in a home renovation, or they were just so slammed with the pressures of being successful. But on the morning of June 3rd, my phone buzzed with a call I didn't expect. "Hey Dad, quick favor." "No, how are you?" "No, happy early birthday." Just the transactional tone Dennis used when he needed a problem to go away. "Trisha and I are heading to Maui for 10 days. Leaving tomorrow morning," he said, his voice clipped. "The house is a wreck, and Trisha's stressed about the energy of the place. We need a deep clean while we're gone. Can you handle hiring someone? I'll Venmo you for the service." I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a half-sanded chair leg. "Dennis, you have an app for everything. Why can't you hire a cleaner from your phone?" "Because Trisha wants someone vetted and low profile," he snapped, that defensive edge creeping in. "Look, you're retired. You've got nothing but time. Just do this for us, okay? The spare key is under the fake rock by the porch. Make sure they do the whole place. Baseboards, windows, the attic, everything." I should have said no. I should have told him that being retired didn't mean being his personal assistant. But there's a specific kind of guilt that comes with being a father to an only child you feel you've lost. You take the crumbs they throw you because you're starving for a connection. "Fine," I said. "I'll call Rosa." Rosa Martinez was a former colleague from my DHS days. She'd burnt out on social work around the same time I did and started a high-end cleaning business. She was the best in the city, meticulous, quiet, and she had the kind of discretion you couldn't buy. The next morning, after I'd watched Dennis's sleek European SUV pull out of the driveway on his doorbell camera, yes, I still had the login from when I helped him buy the place I drove over to let Rosa in. The house was exactly as I remembered. Cold. It smelled like expensive candles and air conditioning. Every surface was marble or glass. Photos of Dennis and Trisha hung in every hallway, smiling in the Maldives, laughing in Aspen, clinking glasses at a vineyard. It was a gallery of a perfect life. I didn't see a single photo of me. I didn't see a single photo of a child. "It's a bit clinical, isn't it, Elmer?" Rosa asked, adjusted her gloves. "It's a brand, Rosa," I sighed. "Not a home, just do what you can. I'll be at the shop if you need anything." I went back to my apartment, trying to lose myself in the rhythm of the sander, but something was gnawing at me. A social worker's instinct is like a low-frequency hum. You don't always notice it until the pitch changes. Why the attic? Dennis and Trisha never used the attic. It was a crawl space, hot and cramped. Why would an influencer care about the energy of a storage room? The hum in my head turned into a siren about an hour later when Rosa called. "Elmer." Her voice was a ragged whisper. "Elmer, you need to get back here, now." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Rosa? Did you fall?" What happened? I'm in the hallway. I haven't gone up yet, she stammered. But I turned off the vacuum to move a rug and I heard it. From the ceiling. From the attic. Heard what? Someone is crying, Elmer. And it's not a recording. It's a person. A small person. I didn't hang up. I just ran. I drove across Portland like a man possessed, ignoring the speed traps on Barber Boulevard. My mind was a kaleidoscope of every horror case I'd ever handled. The basement kids, the closet captives, but this was Dennis, my son, the boy I'd coached in Little League, the man who worked in sales and liked craft beer. He was selfish, sure. He was arrogant, but he wasn't this. When I arrived, Rosa was standing on the front porch, her face the color of parchment. She pointed up at the ceiling. We entered the house in silence. The aesthetic now felt like a shroud. We stood in the upstairs hallway, right beneath the pull-down stairs for the attic, and then I heard it. It wasn't a scream. It was a low, rhythmic whimpering, the sound of someone who had been crying for so long they'd run out of energy to be loud. It was a sound I knew from the darkest corners of my career. I grabbed the cord and yanked the ladder down. The wood creaked, a harsh, violent sound in the sterile house. I climbed. The attic was a furnace. The Portland summer had turned the unventilated space into an oven. Boxes of winter brand clothing and discarded ring lights were stacked everywhere. And there, in the far corner, behind a stack of designer luggage, was a heavy Victorian wardrobe that didn't match anything else in the house. It was padlocked from the outside. My hands shook so hard I could barely grip the heavy bolt cutters I'd grabbed from my truck. With one violent snap, the lock gave way. I swung the doors open. I've seen things that would make most people lose their minds, but nothing prepared me for the sight of that little girl. She looked to be about 5 years old. She was curled into a ball on a stained twin mattress. She was wearing a t-shirt that was 3 sizes too small, her ribs visible through the thin fabric. Her hair was a matted nest of dark tangles. Next to her sat a plastic bowl of dried cereal and a half-empty, lukewarm bottle of water. She looked up at me, squinting against the light, her eyes huge and filled with a terror so deep it felt ancient. Are you the man who brings the bread?" she whispered, her voice barely a rasp. I felt the world tilt. My lungs stopped working. I knelt down, making myself as small as possible. "No, sweetheart, no. My name is Elmer. I'm supposed to be quiet," she said, fresh tears carving tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Trisha says if I'm loud, the monsters will hear me. She says I'm the secret." "You're not a secret," I choked out, the rage beginning to boil in my stomach, a heat that rivaled the attic's. "Who are you, little one?" She looked at a framed photo that had been shoved into the corner of the wardrobe, a photo of Dennis. "That's my daddy," she said. "He told me to wait here until the vacation was over. He said I'm not allowed downstairs because I'll mess up the pictures." I realized then that I wasn't just looking at a victim. I was looking at my own blood. My son had a daughter. He had a child he had never told me about, a child he had hidden away like a piece of broken furniture while he lived his perfect life downstairs. But as I reached out to touch her hand, my eyes caught something on the floor of that wardrobe. It was a stack of legal documents, partially hidden under the mattress. I pulled one out. It was a birth certificate. Sophie Stanley. But it wasn't the name that stopped my heart. It was the date, and the name of the mother. I stared at the paper, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I didn't just find a secret granddaughter. I found the reason Dennis had been so desperate to keep me away for years, a reason that went far deeper than a hidden child. I looked at Sophie, then back at the paper. If what this document said was true, then Dennis hadn't just been neglecting this girl. He had been part of a lie so massive, so calculated, that it made his influencer life look like a petty misdemeanor. "Rosa." I barked down the ladder, my voice cracking with a mixture of fury and absolute dread. "Call the police. And Rosa, tell them we're going to need a forensics team. A big one." Because as I looked around that cramped, sweltering space, I realized the wardrobe wasn't the only thing hidden in this attic, and the person crying in the dark wasn't the only ghost in the Stanley house. The sirens were a blur of blue and red against the suburban Portland sky, a jagged contrast to the manicured lawns and silent driveways of Cedar Hill Drive. I sat on the curb, holding Sophie wrapped in a moving blanket I'd found in the garage. She was so light, a fragile collection of bones and bird-like tremors. She didn't cry anymore. She just stared at the flashing lights with a hollowed-out fascination, as if the world outside the wardrobe was a movie she wasn't sure she was allowed to watch. I looked at my hands, still stained with the dust of the attic and the rust from the bolt cutters. They were shaking. I had spent nearly 4 decades as the man who walked into the fire to pull children out, the one who remained a pillar of granite while mothers wailed and fathers cursed. I was the Iceman of the Oregon DHS. But as I sat there with my granddaughter, a child I hadn't known existed 60 minutes ago, the granite was crumbling into sand. I didn't know it yet, but the discovery of Sophie was just the first layer of paint being stripped away. The true rot lay much deeper in the wood of my son's life. Rosa was talking to a patrol officer, her gestures wide and frantic. She kept pointing toward the roof, toward the hidden oven where Sophie had been ripening in the heat. A female officer, her name tag reading Miller, approached us. She knelt down, her voice dropping into that practiced, soft register used for victims. I recognized the tone instantly. I'd used it 1,000 times. "Hey there, sweetie," Miller said. "My name is Sarah. Can you tell me your name?" Sophie didn't answer. She just pulled the blanket tighter and tucked her chin into my shoulder. The smell of her stale sweat, old dust, and the sharp, metallic tang of fear hit me like a physical punch. I looked at Miller, my eyes hard. "Her name is Sophie Stanley," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "She's 5 years old, and she's my granddaughter." Miller's eyebrows shot up. She looked from the child to me, then at the house. "Your granddaughter, sir? You didn't know she was in there?" "I didn't know she was anywhere," I replied. "My son, he never told me." As they loaded Sophie into the ambulance for a precautionary evaluation, a euphemism for a full forensic medical exam, I felt the first waves of a different kind of pain. It was the pain of hindsight. I began to replay the last 4 years in my head, searching for the glitches in the matrix I should have seen. Dennis had always been a boy who sought the path of least resistance. He wasn't malicious, just malleable. He wanted the shiny things, the status, the feeling of being vetted, as he so often put it. When he met Trisha, I thought she was just a phase, a high-maintenance woman who would eventually tire of his mid-level ambition. But she didn't tire. She redesigned him. I remembered a Thanksgiving 3 years ago. I'd invited them to my place, but Trisha had declined, saying they were cleansing their palate with a raw food retreat. I'd stopped by their house later that week to drop off some leftovers, and Dennis had met me at the door. He wouldn't let me pass the foyer. He claimed the floors were being waxed. I remember seeing a small, colorful plastic ring, the kind that goes on a baby's stacking toy, peeking out from under the hall table. "What's that, Dennis?" I'd asked, pointing. "Oh, just a dog toy," he'd said, kicking it out of sight. "Trisha's thinking about getting a Frenchie. For the brand, you know." I had believed him. Why wouldn't I? You don't expect your son to be a jailer. You don't expect the man you raised to turn his own flesh and blood into a discrepancy that needed to be filed away in the dark. At the hospital, the sterile white hallways felt like a pressurized chamber. I sat in the waiting room, the birth certificate I'd swiped from the attic burning a hole in my pocket. I hadn't told the police about it yet. I needed to see it again. I needed to be sure. I pulled the crumpled paper out. Sophie Marie Stanley. Mother, Lydia Vance. My breath hitched. Lydia. I remembered Lydia. She was Dennis's girlfriend in his late 20s, a soft-spoken girl with a laugh like wind chimes. She'd been a preschool teacher. I'd loved her. I'd thought she was the one. And then, one day, Dennis told me they'd broken up. He said she'd moved back to Ohio, that she'd realized she wanted a different life. 2 months later, Trisha was in the picture. The transition had been so fast I'd barely had time to blink. If Sophie was 5, that meant Lydia had been pregnant when they broke up. Or she hadn't moved to Ohio at all. A doctor came out, a tall man with tired eyes named Dr. Aris. He looked at my DHS ID, which I still carried in my wallet like a lucky charm, and sighed. "Mr. Stanley, your granddaughter is stable, but the neglect is..." significant. She's severely dehydrated, and her bone density is low, likely from a lack of vitamin D and movement. But it's the psychological state that worries me most. She's conditioned, Elmer. She doesn't speak above a whisper. She asks for permission to breathe too loudly. I felt a cold, sharp blade of rage slide into my heart. And the mother? We're checking the records, Eris said, but Sophie told the nurse something chilling. She said her first mommy went to sleep in the garden and never woke up, and then the new mommy put her in the clouds. The clouds? The attic? I stood up, my knees popping. The first mommy? You mean Lydia Vance? The name on the medical intake from her birth is Lydia Vance, Eris confirmed. But Elmer, Lydia Vance passed away 4 years ago. A hit and run in a grocery store parking lot. The case was never solved. The world seemed to lurch on its axis. Lydia was dead. Dennis had been receiving child support for Sophie from a trust Lydia's parents had set up. I knew this because Lydia's family was wealthy. Dennis was the sole guardian. He had the money, he had the house, and then he had Trisha. Trisha, who didn't want a ready-made family cluttering up her aesthetic. Trisha, whose Instagram feed featured a flawless white bedroom that was once meant to be a nursery, now converted into a meditation space for her followers. I stepped into the hospital room where Sophie lay. She looked even smaller in the massive hospital bed. She was clutching a plastic cup of water like it was made of gold. When she saw me, her eyes darted to the door, then back to me. "Is the lady coming?" she whispered. "No, Sophie. No lady is coming. Just me." Trisha said if I came down, the followers would get mad. She murmured, her voice drifting. She said they don't like children. Children are messy. They ruin the lines. The lines. The geometric perfection of a life lived for a camera lens. My son had traded his daughter's childhood for a high-speed internet connection and a woman who viewed a 5-year-old as a smudge on a lens. I sat by her bed, watching the IV drip. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Dennis. He was likely at the airport in Maui, waiting for his first Mai Tai, blissfully unaware that his world had just ended. "Hey Dad, Rosa finished the place. Trisha wants to make sure she didn't touch the wardrobe in the attic. It's got some vintage equipment in it that's super fragile. Don't let her near it." I stared at the screen. The audacity of it, the casual, breezy lie sent a shudder through me. He wasn't worried about Sophie's health. He wasn't worried about her being trapped in a box while he tanned. He was worried about the equipment. I didn't reply. Instead, I called Charlotte Webb. Charlotte was the meanest, smartest family lawyer in the Pacific Northwest. We'd gone head-to-head on dozens of cases when I was at DHS. She was a shark in a Chanel suit, and right now, I needed someone who knew how to draw blood. "Elmer?" Her voice crackled. "You're retired. Unless you're calling to invite me to a woodworking show, I'm busy." "I found a child, Charlotte. My granddaughter. She's been in an attic for heaven knows how long. My son and his wife are in Hawaii." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear the sound of a pen being set down. "Give me the address," she said, her voice now cold and professional. "And Elmer, don't say a word to your son. Not one. Let him keep posting his pictures. Every photo he takes in Maui is another nail I'm going to drive into his hands." "I want them to lose everything, Charlotte," I said. "I don't just want her safe. I want them erased." "We'll start with the emergency kinship custody," she said. "But Elmer, if we go this route, you're opening a war. Dennis will come for you. He'll use every cent he has to make you look like a senile old man who kidnapped his daughter." "Let him try," I whispered, looking at Sophie's sleeping face. "He doesn't know who I am. He thinks I'm the man who gave him a house. He's forgotten that I'm the man who knows where the bodies are buried." I hung up and looked at the birth certificate again. There was a small smudge of blue ink at the bottom, a thumbprint from when it was first issued. Lydia's thumbprint. A woman who was dead, whose daughter was hidden, and whose accident was beginning to look more and more like a convenient clearing of the deck. I didn't know yet if Dennis was a murderer, but I knew he was a thief. He had stolen 5 years of sun from this girl. He had stolen her voice. As the sun began to set over Portland, casting long, bloody shadows across the hospital floor, I realized that the cleaning Dennis had asked for was finally happening. But it wasn't the baseboards or the windows that were getting scrubbed. It was the lie he called a life. And I was just getting started. The next morning, the lifestyle curator and her husband were scheduled to fly back. They thought they were coming home to a spotless house and a quiet secret. They didn't know that the lock was broken, the bird had flown, and the man they thought was just retired was currently standing in their living room with a team of detectives and a very, very long memory. What happened next, though? What the detectives found when they started pulling up the floorboards in that meditation room, that was the moment I realized my son wasn't just a coward. He was a monster. The silence of the suburbs is a lie. It's a thick, heavy blanket designed to muffle the screams and hide the cracks in the foundation. As I stood in the center of Dennis's living room, watching a forensic technician dust the white marble kitchen island for prints, the silence was finally being broken. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the scratch of a detective's pen, it all felt like a symphony of justice. Detective Miller was in the meditation room, the one Trisha had spent thousands of dollars to curate into a sanctuary of mindfulness. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, watching them work. This room had no windows. It was an interior space, designed for sensory deprivation. "Mr. Stanley," Miller said, looking up from a section of the baseboard, "you said your son mentioned a renovation in here?" "That's what he told me," I said. "He said they were clearing out space for better energy. In reality, he was clearing out his daughter." Miller gestured to a corner of the room where the gray hardwood planks looked slightly uneven. "The floor was recently reset. It's a rush job. See the gaps in the tongue and groove? A professional wouldn't leave it like that. Neither would a man obsessed with aesthetics, unless he was in a hurry to hide something." She signaled to a technician with a pry bar. I held my breath. I'd seen this before. In my career, I'd found drugs under floorboards, stolen cash, and once, a collection of weapons. But the look on Dennis's face when he'd talked about this room, it wasn't the look of a criminal hiding contraband. It was the look of a man trying to bury a memory. The wood groaned as the pry bar sunk in. With a sharp crack, the first plank came up, then the second. Beneath the subfloor, nestled in the insulation, was a flat, metal lockbox. It wasn't large, about the size of a laptop, but it was heavy. Miller didn't open it there. She bagged it, labeled it, and handed it to the evidence tech. "We'll open this at the precinct. But I think your son's meditation involved more than just breathing exercises, Elmer." I felt a cold sweat prickle my neck. My son was a sales manager. He was a golfer. He was a man who complained about the price of organic kale. I kept trying to reconcile the boy who used to cry when he skinned his knee with the man who had built a prison in his attic and a grave in his floorboards. "Detective," a voice shouted from the front porch. We moved to the window. A sleek, black European SUV had just pulled into the driveway. My heart did a slow, heavy roll in my chest. Dennis and Trisha were home. They didn't see the unmarked police cruisers parked down the street. They only saw my truck and the front door standing wide open. I watched through the glass as Dennis stepped out of the driver's seat. He looked tanned, relaxed, wearing a linen shirt that probably cost more than my first car. Trisha followed, her hair perfectly tousled, her face hidden behind oversized designer sunglasses. She was already holding her phone, likely checking her engagement metrics before she'd even stepped foot back on her intentional soil. I walked to the front door and stepped out onto the porch. I wanted them to see me. I wanted to be the first thing they encountered. "Dad?" Dennis stopped halfway up the walk, his suitcase thudding onto the pavement. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It was a reflex, a mask he put on for the world. "What are you doing here? I thought I told you we'd be back late. And why is the door open?" Trisha stepped up beside him, her nose wrinkling as if she could smell the presence of unvetted people in her house. "Elmer, is the cleaning done? I really need to get in there and decompress." The flight was a total nightmare. I didn't say anything. I just looked at them. I looked at the tan lines on their wrists where their expensive watches had protected them from the Maui sun while Sophie sat in the dark. I looked at the ease of their movements, the utter lack of guilt. "The cleaning is done, Dennis," I said, my voice low and vibrating with a rage I was struggling to contain. "But we found a few spots Rosa couldn't get out. Specifically the blood on the attic floor." Dennis's face didn't just go pale. It went gray, It was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The tan seemed to evaporate, leaving behind a sallow, sickly mask of terror. Trisha, however, didn't collapse. She sharpened. She pulled her phone up. The camera lens pointed directly at me. "I don't know what you're talking about, Elmer, but you're trespassing. This is our private property. If you've damaged anything, I'm going to make sure my followers know exactly who you are." "Your followers?" I let out a short, jagged laugh. "Trisha, by tonight your followers are going to be the only ones left who don't know you're a child abuser. And even they'll figure it out when the mugshots drop." "Dad, stop." Dennis stepped forward, his hands out in a placating gesture. "You don't understand. Sophie, she has issues. Psychological issues. We had to keep her there for her own safety. We were going to get her help, I swear. We were just waiting for the right time." "The right time?" I barked, stepping off the porch to meet him. I was shorter than him, but in that moment, I felt like a giant. She was in a wardrobe. Dennis. Padlocked. She was eating dry cereal out of a plastic bowl like a stray dog. "You went to Hawaii. You drank cocktails while your daughter sat in a furnace." "It was a professional recommendation," Trisha shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that made the neighbor's dog start barking again. "A holistic specialist told us that isolation was the only way to break her attachment issues. We were following a protocol." "Show me the specialist." Miller's voice came from behind me. She stepped onto the porch, her badge hanging from a chain around her neck. "Show me the medical records. Show me the protocol that involves locking a 5-year-old in an unventilated attic for 10 days without a guardian." Trisha's phone dropped an inch. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Dennis looked at the detective, then back at me. "Dad, please, don't let them do this. You know me. I'm your son." "That's the part that hurts the most, Dennis," I whispered. "I know exactly who you are. I raised you. I just never realized I raised a coward." The next 10 minutes were a blur of, "Step away from the vehicle, and you have the right to remain silent." I watched as they handcuffed my son. He didn't fight. He just went limp, sobbing into the shoulder of his linen shirt. Trisha, on the other hand, went out fighting. She screamed about brand defamation and illegal search and seizure until Miller had to practically fold her into the back of the cruiser. As the cars pulled away, the neighborhood began to wake up. Curtains twitched. Neighbors stepped onto their lawns, whispering, holding their phones. The aesthetic of Cedar Hill Drive was officially shattered. I stayed behind. Miller gave me a few minutes to gather my thoughts while the text finished up. I walked back into the house, into the quiet, and headed straight for that meditation room. The floor was still open, the gaping hole a dark wound in the center of the room. I sat on the floor, my legs dangling into the subfloor space. I reached into the insulation, feeling around where the lockbox had been. My fingers brushed against something soft. Something that wasn't metal. I pulled it out. It was a small, tattered teddy bear. It was stained and missing an eye, but I recognized it instantly. I had bought that bear for Lydia Vance the day she told me she was pregnant. I remembered her holding it to her belly, her eyes shining with a future that was supposed to be bright. Why was this here? If Lydia had died in a hit-and-run 4 years ago, why was her child's first toy buried under the floorboards of a room Trisha called her sanctuary? I didn't know it yet, but that bear was a breadcrumb. I drove back to the hospital, the bear sitting on the passenger seat like a silent passenger. When I got to Sophie's room, she was awake. She was eating a bowl of grapes, picking them up one by one with trembling fingers. When she saw me, her face lit up with a small, cautious glow. "Grandpa," she whispered. "I'm here, Sophie." I sat by her bed and held out the bear. She froze. Her hand stopped halfway to her mouth. She looked at the bear, then at me, and her lower lip began to quiver. "Mommy's bear," she breathed. "You remember this?" She nodded slowly, reaching out to touch the matted fur. "Mommy said the bear would keep me safe when she went to the garden, but then the lady took it. She said Mommy didn't need it anymore because the garden is very deep." "The garden?" "The deep garden." I felt a chill wash over me that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. I pulled out my phone and called Charlotte Webb. "Charlotte," I said, my voice shaking, "we need to look into Lydia Vance's death again, not just the police report. I want the autopsy. I want the witness statements. I want everything. Elmer? What did you find? I found a bear, Charlotte, and I found a little girl who thinks her mother is buried in a garden. The hit and run happened in a parking lot, Elmer, Charlotte said, her voice turning sharp. There was no garden. Exactly, I said, looking at Sophie as she hugged the one-eyed bear to her chest. Which means Lydia Vance didn't die where the police think she did. And if she didn't die there, then my son isn't just a negligent father, he's a graveyard keeper. I hung up and watched Sophie drift back to sleep. The revenge I'd wanted, the loss of their house, their money, their brand, suddenly felt small. It felt insignificant. I didn't just want them in jail. I wanted to know what really happened to Lydia. I wanted to know why Dennis was so afraid of the meditation room. And most of all, I wanted to know what was in that lockbox. Detective Miller was currently taking to the station. What happened next changed everything, because while the police were processing Dennis and Trisha, I received a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. A voice on the other end, raspy and terrified, said only 4 words before hanging up. Check the guest house. The guest house. I hadn't even thought about the guest house. It was a small, converted garage at the back of the property that Trisha used as a content studio. It was always locked. Even the cleaners weren't allowed inside. I stood up, kissed Sophie on the forehead, and walked out of the hospital. The sun was gone, replaced by the gray, drizzling rain of a Portland night. I drove back to Cedar Hill Drive, the crime scene tape fluttering in the wind. I didn't call the police. Not yet. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to know if the rot in my family was just a stain, or if the whole tree was dead. I walked to the back of the property, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The content studio stood silent, its windows blackened with privacy film. I reached for the handle, knowing that once I opened this door, there would be no going back. I didn't know it yet, but the real horror hadn't been in the attic. The attic was just the waiting room. The real secret was much, much worse. The rain didn't just fall in Portland that night. It felt like the sky was trying to wash the city clean of its sins. I stood in the backyard of the house on Cedar Hill Drive, my flashlight beam cutting through the downpour, landing on the door of the guest house. Trisha called it her content studio, a place where the magic of her digital life was manufactured. To the rest of the world, it was a sanctuary of inspiration. To me, standing there with a heavy heart and a rusted crowbar, it looked like a tomb. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to walk into the nerve center of a nightmare. The lock was high-end, a biometric scanner that required a fingerprint or a code. But the thing about content studios is that they usually have large windows for natural light. I walked around to the side, found a window that wasn't perfectly latched, and shoved. It gave way with a sickening slide. I hauled myself over the sill, landing on a floor that felt too soft, thick, white shag carpet that felt like walking on a cloud. The air inside smelled like ozone and expensive perfume. I clicked off my flashlight and let my eyes adjust. Even in the gloom, the place was a temple to vanity. 3 different ring lights stood like skeletal sentries. A massive green screen was draped over one wall. Racks of designer clothes tags still attached lined the perimeter. This was where the intentional living was staged. But the voice on the phone hadn't told me to check the clothes. I moved deeper into the studio, toward a small partitioned area in the back that Trisha used as her edit suite. On the desk sat a high-powered computer with 3 monitors, currently in sleep mode. Next to it was a series of external hard drives, their little blue lights blinking like tiny rhythmic heartbeats. I'm a woodworker, not a hacker, but I've spent enough time in government offices to know how to navigate a file system. I sat in Trisha's ergonomic chair. It cost more than my first 3 lathes combined, and tapped the spacebar. The monitors flickered to life. There was no password. Trisha was so arrogant, so convinced of her own untouchability, that she hadn't even bothered to lock her digital front door. I began clicking through folders. Most of them were what you'd expect. Summer, Vibe, 2025, Sponsor, Pitch, Decks, Skin, Care, Routine. But then, tucked inside a hidden directory labeled System, Logs, I found a folder named The Project. I opened it. My breath hitched in my throat. It wasn't photos of clothes. It was video files. Hundreds of them. I clicked the first one, dated 3 years ago. The video was shot from a high-angle security camera, the kind you'd hide in a smoke detector. It showed a small room, the meditation room. But it wasn't a meditation room then. It was a nursery. A beautiful, sun-drenched nursery with a crib and a rocking chair. Lydia Vance was in the video. She was sitting in the rocking chair, nursing a tiny, infant Sophie. She looked tired but radiant. She was singing a low, sweet lullaby. And then, the door opened. Dennis walked in. He didn't look like the man I'd seen in handcuffs today. He looked frantic. He started shouting, his gestures violent. Lydia stood up, clutching the baby, her face a mask of terror. I watched, frozen, as the man who was my son grabbed Lydia by the arm and threw her toward the door. The video ended there. I clicked the next file, and the next. It was a digital diary of a slow-motion execution. I watched the nursery get stripped of its color. I watched the windows get boarded up from the outside. I watched Trisha enter the frame for the first time, wearing the same cold, predatory smile she'd worn on the porch today. "It's about the brand, Dennis." Her voice came through the speakers, sharp and brittle. "We can't have a toddler ruining the clean girl aesthetic. People want aspiration, not dirty diapers. We need to minimize the distraction. Minimize the distraction." That's how she talked about my granddaughter. But the most damning evidence wasn't the videos of the room being changed. It was a spreadsheet I found in a subfolder. It was a ledger of every cent of child support that had come from Lydia's parents' estate. Beside each deposit was a corresponding withdrawal. Deposit, $1,200. Sophie's support. Withdrawal, $1,150. Trisha's Botox filler. Withdrawal, $50. Bulk cereal. Water. The math was a confession. They were spending $50 a month on a human life so they could spend thousands on their own faces. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the edge of the desk. I thought about Sophie in that attic, listening to the muffled sounds of her father and this woman laughing downstairs, eating steak while she chewed on dry flakes of corn. I thought about the deep garden she'd mentioned. I went back to the video folder and scrolled to the bottom. I found a file titled Final Resolution.mp4. The date was the same day Lydia Vance died in that grocery store parking lot. I hesitated. My finger hovered over the mouse. I knew that once I saw this, there would be no turning back. There would be no family to save. There would only be the wreckage. I clicked. The video was from a dashboard camera in Dennis's SUV. It was night. The rain was heavy, just like tonight. I saw the headlights illuminating a dark, wooded road, the road that led to the back entrance of this very property. A figure appeared in the light. It was Lydia. She was running, carrying a bag, looking over her shoulder. The SUV didn't slow down, it accelerated. I saw the impact. I saw Lydia's body fly into the darkness of the brush. And then, the car stopped. Dennis didn't get out. Trisha did. She walked to the edge of the road, looked down at the woman she'd just replaced, and then looked directly at the camera. She didn't look horrified. She looked inconvenienced. "She's still breathing, Dennis." Trisha's voice was calm, almost bored. "If we call the police, the brand is over. The house, the money, the life. It all goes away. Do you want to go back to being a mid-level sales hack in a cubicle?" There was a long silence from the driver's seat. Then, the sound of the engine revving. The car moved forward, off the road, and into the brush. The screen went black. I sat in the dark studio, the only sound the rain drumming on the roof and the heavy, ragged sound of my own sobbing. My son wasn't just a coward. He was a participant in a cold-blooded murder. They hadn't reported a hit and run. They had staged one later, miles away, after they'd dealt with the body here. "Check the guest house." The voice on the phone, I realized now who it was. It was the assistant Trisha had fired 3 months ago, a girl named Maya, who had always looked a little too nervous whenever I'd seen her. She'd been the one filming the content. She'd seen the files. She'd been too afraid to go to the police, but she'd seen me on the news. I grabbed a thumb drive from the desk and began copying everything. The videos, the ledger, the dashcam footage. My hands were steady now. The grief had been burned away by a cold surgical necessity. As the progress bar ticked up, 80% and 90%, I heard a sound outside, a car door. I froze. Dennis and Trisha were in custody. They shouldn't be here. I crept to the window and looked out. A black sedan was parked in the driveway. A man stepped out. He was wearing a dark suit, his face obscured by an umbrella. He didn't look like a cop. He looked like a fixer. My heart hammered. If they'd sent someone to clean the studio, I was trapped. I watched him walk toward the front door of the main house. He had a key. He went inside. I knew he wouldn't find what he was looking for there. The police had already taken the lockbox from the meditation room, but it wouldn't be long before he checked the guest house. The thumb drive clicked. Transfer complete. I shoved the drive into my pocket, grabbed the crowbar, and moved toward the back exit. But as I reached for the handle, the lights in the studio suddenly flared on. "You really should have left it alone, Elmer." I turned. Standing in the doorway of the edit suite wasn't the man in the suit. It was Robert Chen, Dennis's lawyer. He wasn't wearing his decent corporate lawyer mask anymore. He looked tired, his tie loosened, a heavy manila envelope tucked under his arm. "Robert," I said, my voice like gravel, "you're a little late for the party. The police already have the house." "They have the house, yes," Chen said, stepping into the room. "But they don't have the server. Not yet. I told Dennis this day would come. I told him Trisha's vanity would be the death of him. She couldn't help herself, could she? She had to record it all. She thought it made her powerful." "You knew?" I felt the rage rising again. "You knew what they did to Lydia? You knew Sophie was in that attic?" "I'm a lawyer, Elmer. I know what my clients tell me," he said, but his eyes shifted. "My job was to protect the assets. But Dennis called me from the precinct. He's panicking. He told me to come here and secure the digital records before the search warrant expanded to the studio." "You're an accessory, Robert, after the fact." "I'm a man who wants to get paid," Chen replied, reaching into his jacket. For a second I thought he was pulling a gun. Instead he pulled out a cigarette. He didn't light it. "Give me the drive, Elmer. I'll make sure it disappears, and I'll make sure you get a generous consultation fee to move to Arizona and forget any of this happened. You're 64. You've got maybe 20 good years left. Why spend them in courtrooms and prison visiting areas?" I looked at the man. He was the embodiment of everything I'd fought against for 38 years. The people who looked the other way. The people who put a price tag on a child's life. "I've spent my life looking at the grain of the wood, Robert," I said, stepping toward him. "And you're nothing but rot. Don't be a hero, Elmer. You're an old man with a hobby." "I'm an old man who found his granddaughter," I said. Before he could react, I swung the crowbar. I didn't hit him. I didn't need to. I smashed the main monitor on the desk, the glass exploding in a shower of sparks. Then I smashed the server tower. I didn't care about the original files anymore. I had the copy in my pocket. Chen lunged for me, but he was a man of desks and law libraries. I'd spent 40 years hauling furniture and lifting crates. I stepped aside, tripped him, and watched him sprawl onto the white shag carpet. I didn't wait. I ran out the back door, into the rain, and headed for the woods at the back of the property. I knew these woods. I'd helped Dennis clear the brush 3 years ago. I knew where the old service road was. As I crashed through the wet branches, my mind was screaming. Check the guest house. I had the evidence of the murder. I had the evidence of the theft. But as I reached my truck, parked a quarter-mile away, I realized something that made my blood run cold. In the video, the one of the final resolution, I'd seen something in the background of the dash cam footage. Just for a split second, a flash of a yellow rain slicker. It wasn't Dennis. And it wasn't Trisha. There was someone else there that night. Someone who had watched them bury Lydia Vance in the deep garden. I started the engine, my hands shaking on the wheel. I needed to get to Charlotte. I needed to get the police back to that property with a cadaver dog. But as I pulled onto the main road, a pair of headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. They didn't have a siren. They didn't have a police light. They were high beams, bright and aggressive, and they were closing fast. I realized then that the fixer in the suit wasn't there for the server. He was there for the only witness left who wasn't in a jail cell. Me. I looked at the thumb drive on the dashboard. It was the only thing that could save Sophie now. The only thing that could give Lydia peace. And I was driving a 20-year-old Ford F-150 against a professional in a modern sedan. What happened next changed the nature of the war. I didn't drive to the police station. I drove toward the one place I knew better than any other, the old DHS warehouse on the waterfront. A place of narrow alleys, heavy gates, and secrets that stayed buried. But as I rounded the corner near the Willamette River, a second set of headlights appeared in front of me. I was boxed in. I gripped the steering wheel, a grim smile touching my lips. They thought I was a victim. They thought I was a retired social worker. They forgot that I was a Stanley. And in my family, we don't go into the dark without a light. The tires of my old Ford screamed against the wet pavement as I slammed the gear into reverse. The headlights in front of me, a silver Audi, brightened as they accelerated to close the gap. Behind me, the black sedan that had followed me from the house was already blocking the narrow mouth of the alley. I was caught in a pincer move between the river and the rusted iron gates of the old DHS storage facility. I've spent half my life in this part of Portland. Before the waterfront was gentrified with glass condos and artisanal coffee shops, it was a graveyard of industry. I knew this warehouse. I knew that the gate to the loading dock didn't lock properly because I'd filed the report on its structural failure 3 years ago. I didn't think twice. I cut the wheel, mounted the curb with a bone-jarring thud, and rammed the Ford's rear bumper into the chain-link gate. The metal groaned and gave way, the rusted latch snapping like a dry twig. I fishtailed into the darkened loading bay, the tires kicking up a spray of oily water. I didn't stop to see if they followed. I knew the Audi couldn't clear the curb, but the sedan was already turning. I had maybe 30 seconds. I pulled the truck deep into the shadows of the overhang, killed the engine, and grabbed the thumb drive. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my chest, but my hands were cold and steady. I didn't know it yet, but the men in those cars weren't just working for a lawyer. They were the cleanup crew for a multi-million-dollar lifestyle empire. I slipped out of the truck and melted into the darkness of the warehouse interior. The air inside was thick with the scent of wet concrete and ancient paper, decades of foster care records and evidence files that the state was too cheap to digitize. It was a labyrinth of cardboard and metal shelving. I moved toward the back office, the one with the landline that I knew still worked. But then, my cell phone buzzed. It was a restricted number. My first instinct was to ignore it, but the persistence of the vibration felt like a warning. I answered. "Dad?" It was Dennis. His voice was different, no longer the arrogant, polished sales manager. He sounded hollow, stripped of the bravado. I could hear the echoes of a jail block in the background, the clanging of heavy doors, the distant, muffled shouting. "Dennis," I whispered, leaning against a stack of files labeled Case Closures, 1998. "You shouldn't be calling me. You have a lawyer for that." "Chen isn't helping me, Dad. He's scared," Dennis stammered. I could hear him gasping for air, a panic attack in progress. Trisha told him everything. About the investors. "Dad, you have to listen to me. They're not just going to let the brand fail. There's too much money tied up in the sponsors. They'll do anything to keep the final resolution video from getting out." "You killed her, Dennis," I said, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "You and that woman ran her over and watched her die in the brush. And then you locked her child in a wardrobe for 5 years. Why would I help you?" "I didn't want to," he shrieked, the sound echoing through the phone. "It was Trisha. She said Lydia was going to ruin everything. She was going to sue for full custody, and she was going to tell the world about Trisha's past, the debt, the fake degrees. Trisha said we just needed to scare her. But then she hit the gas." "Dad, I didn't hit the gas." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost pathetic. He was already building his defense, trying to pin the murder on the woman he'd helped cover for. He was trying to humiliate me by appealing to a fatherly love that he had already executed. "You sat in the car, Dennis," I said coldly. "You watched, and then you helped her bury the mother of your child. You're just as dead to me as Lydia is." "Wait, Dad, please." His voice turned into a frantic sob. "They're going after Sophie. If they can't get the drive from you, they'll use her as leverage. They know you won't let her go. "They're coming for the hospital, Dad." The world stopped spinning. I felt the blood drain from my extremities. I looked at the dark corners of the warehouse, expecting the men in the suits to step out of the shadows. But they weren't here to kill me, at least. Not yet. They were here to keep me busy while the real resolution happened at the hospital. "If you touch her, Dennis," I whispered, my voice a jagged edge, "I will burn everything you ever touched. I will spend every second of my remaining life making sure you never see a day of sunlight again." I hung up before he could answer. I didn't have time to wait for the police to navigate the warehouse district. I needed to get out, and I needed to get to Sophie. I turned toward the side exit, but a flashlight beam cut through the dark, sweeping over the crates just inches from my head. "Mr. Stanley?" The voice was female. It wasn't Trisha. It was soft, trembling, and terrified. I peered over a stack of boxes. A young woman was standing near the loading dock, wearing a yellow rain slicker, the same one I'd seen in the dashcam footage. "Maya?" I asked, stepping into the light. She flinched, nearly dropping her flashlight. Maya was Trisha's former creative assistant, a girl in her early 20s who had likely started the job dreaming of social media fame and ended it as a witness to a homicide. "I saw your truck," she whispered, her eyes red-rimmed and sunken. "I've been following you since you left the house. I was the one who called you. I couldn't keep it anymore. I saw what they were doing to that little girl. I used to sneak her crackers when Trisha was filming downstairs, but then Trisha found a crumb in the attic and she almost killed me. You were there that night, weren't you?" I stepped closer, the thumb drive clenched in my hand. "In the woods. You saw them." Maya nodded, a silent, rhythmic movement. "I was supposed to be filming a nature walk for a sponsor. I was in the brush with the gimbal. I saw the SUV. I saw Lydia. I thought it was an accident at first, but then I heard them talking. I recorded it. Elmer. Not on the server. On my personal phone. This was the twist I hadn't seen coming. Trisha was so obsessed with documenting her life that she'd forced her assistant to record her greatest crime without even realizing it. "Where is the phone, Maya?" "I buried it," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "In the garden, the place Sophie talks about. It's not a garden, Elmer. It's an old well at the back of the property, covered by a decorative stone fountain. Trisha told her it was where the fairies lived. It's where they put Lydia. The deep garden. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a grave. I need you to go to the police, Maya," I said, grabbing her shoulders. "Right now. Go to Detective Miller at the downtown precinct. Tell her everything. Give her the location of the well. But the men, the ones in the cars, I'll deal with them," I said, a grim resolve settling over me. "They think I have the only copy of the evidence. As long as they're chasing me, they aren't looking at you. And they aren't at the hospital. Go. Go." I pushed her toward the side door. I watched her disappear into the rain, a small yellow ghost in the night. Then, I turned back toward the warehouse interior. I had a plan. It was a social worker's plan, messy, psychological, and designed to expose the truth through the cracks. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone. I opened Trisha's Instagram app. I still had the login saved on my computer from when I'd helped her optimize her security settings a year ago. She hadn't changed it. I went to her live feature. 47,000 people were currently wondering why their favorite lifestyle guru was silent. I hit the Go Live button. I didn't show my face. I pointed the camera at the thumb drive sitting on a stack of files. Then, I began to play the audio from the final resolution video I'd copied in the studio. "She's still breathing, Dennis. Do you want to go back to being a mid-level sales hack in a cubicle?" The comments started rolling in instantly. "Is this a hack? Wait, is that Trisha's voice? Who is Lydia? Oh my God, is this real?" I watched the viewers count climb. 500, 1,000, 200, 5,000. I was using her own brand to dismantle her. I was weaponizing the very vanity that had fueled her cruelty. The humiliation was total. The woman who lived for the camera was being unmade by the very lens she worshipped. Suddenly, the warehouse doors at the far end burst open. The man in the suit, the fixer, was framed in the light of the Audi's high beams. He had a suppressed handgun in his hand. He wasn't looking for a consultation fee anymore. "Turn it off, Elmer," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hollow space. "You're live streaming a suicide. Put the phone down and give me the drive, and maybe I'll make it quick." I didn't turn it off. I leaned into the microphone of the phone. "Did you hear that? Followers? That's the sound of the intentional life coming to an end. This is the man who clears the distractions for the Stanley brand." The fixer froze. He realized then that he wasn't just killing an old man in a warehouse. He was being broadcast to 10,000 witnesses in real time. He looked at the phone, then at me, the confusion and rage battling on his face. "You're insane," he hissed. "No," I said, stepping back into the shadows of the file stacks. "I'm just a grandfather, and I'm tired of secrets." I dropped the phone, still live, still recording, into a deep, metal trash bin, full of shredded paper. It would take them minutes to find it, and by then, the video would be saved on 10,000 different servers across the world. I ran for the back staircase, the one that led to the roof. I had to get to the hospital. I had to believe that the police were already seeing the stream. I had to believe that the brand was finally, irrevocably broken. But as I reached the rooftop, the cold wind whipping the rain into my face, I saw a helicopter rising from the direction of downtown. It wasn't a news chopper. It was a private transport, and it was heading straight for the hospital roof. I realized then that the investors weren't just cleanup crews. They were an extraction team. They weren't just going to silence Sophie. They were going to take her. I stood on the edge of the roof, looking down at the black river below, the thumb drive heavy in my pocket. I had the truth. I had the evidence. But I was miles away, and the people who had turned my son into a monster were already closing in on the only thing I had left to love. "Not today," I whispered to the rain. "Not today." I didn't jump. I turned and headed for the old fire escape. I didn't know how I was going to beat a helicopter to the hospital, but I knew one thing for certain. The Stanley aesthetic was about to get very, very messy. The fire escape groaned under my weight as I scrambled down the slick metal rungs, the Portland rain lashing at my face. Behind me, I could hear the fixer swearing as he dug through the trash bin, trying to retrieve the phone that was currently broadcasting his voice and the sounds of a murder confession to tens of thousands of people. I didn't wait to see if he found it. I hit the pavement, my boots splashing into a deep puddle, and bolted for the side street where I'd stashed my truck. I didn't know it yet, but the lifestyle Trisha had been selling wasn't just about clothes and skincare. It was a front for a high-level money laundering operation called the Catalyst Group. My 2005 Ford F-150 wasn't built for speed, but it was built for endurance. I threw it into gear and tore away from the warehouse district, my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. The silver Audi was still back there, its headlights like the eyes of a shark cutting through the mist. They weren't going to stop. They couldn't. If that thumb drive reached the authorities, it wouldn't just be Dennis and Trisha going to prison. It would be the entire board of directors of a multi-million-dollar shell company. As I sped toward the hospital, my mind was a storm of its own. I thought about the deep garden. Maya's words haunted me, the old well, the fountain, the fairy tale Trisha had spun for a 5-year-old to keep her from wondering why her mother was never coming back. It was a level of psychological warfare that made my 38 years in social work feel like a walk in the park. I reached for my dashboard and grabbed the spare burner phone I kept in the glove box. I dialed Detective Miller. "Miller," she snapped on the first ring. "It's Elmer. I'm heading to the hospital. They're coming for Sophie." "Elmer, where are you? We've seen the live stream. The precinct is in chaos. We've got units heading to the warehouse." "The warehouse is a distraction, Detective. The fixer is there, but the real threat is the helicopter. Catalyst is sending a private team to extract Sophie from the pediatric wing. If they get her, she's gone. They'll use her to negotiate the return of the drive." "We're 3 minutes out, Elmer. Hold on." 3 minutes is too long," I whispered. I pulled into the hospital's emergency bay, not bothering with a parking spot. I jumped out of the truck, leaving the door standing wide open. I could see the helicopter now, a sleek black bird hovering over the roof of the North Tower. The searchlight swept across the glass, blinding and predatory. I ran into the lobby, my wet boots squeaking on the linoleum. The security guard at the front desk looked up, but I didn't stop to explain. I flashed my old retired DHS badge, the one that still looked official enough in a crisis. "Security breach in the North Tower," I shouted as I ran past. "Call for a lockdown, now." I didn't wait for his response. I took the stairs 2 at a time, my lungs burning, my 64-year-old knees screaming for me to stop. But every time I felt like collapsing, I pictured Sophie's face when I'd handed her that one-eyed teddy bear. I pictured the way she asked for permission to breathe. When I reached the 4th floor, the pediatric wing, the air felt different. It was too quiet. The nurse's station was empty. A single tray of medication had been overturned on the floor, white pills scattered like teeth across the blue carpet. "Sophie," I called out, my voice echoing in the hallway. I reached room 412. The door was ajar. My heart stopped. I pushed it open, expecting the worst. The bed was empty. The IV line had been ripped out, a small bead of blood staining the white sheets. The one-eyed bear was lying on the floor, face down. Looking for this? I spun around. Standing in the corner of the room was a man I hadn't seen in the warehouse. He was older, gray-haired, wearing a tailored navy suit and a pair of spectacles that looked like they cost more than my apartment. He was holding Sophie by the hand. She was trembling, her eyes wide with a terror that broke my heart all over again. "Who are you?" I asked, my hand sliding toward the heavy metal flashlight I'd tucked into my waistband. "I'm the man who pays for the intentional living, Mr. Stanley. My name is Julian Thorne. I'm the CEO of the Catalyst Group. And unfortunately for everyone involved, your son is a very weak link in a very expensive chain. Let her go, Julian. The police are downstairs. The whole world is watching the live stream." Thorne smiled, a cold, thin expression that never reached his eyes. The live stream was a clever touch, a bit primitive, but effective for a man of your vintage. But the world has a very short memory, Elmer. By tomorrow morning, the video will be flagged as a deepfake. Trisha's followers will be told she was hacked by a disgruntled, mentally unstable relative you. The brand will pivot to a narrative of victimhood and recovery. And Lydia Vance? Are you going to tell the followers she's a deepfake too? Thorne's smile flickered. Lydia was an unfortunate variable. Dennis was supposed to handle her quietly. He chose a more permanent solution, one that we've had to spend a great deal of money to keep hidden. Now, give me the drive, and the girl stays here. You go home, you retire, and you never speak of the Stanley family again. I looked at Sophie. She was looking at me, her small mouth forming the word grandpa. I realized in that moment that I had hit rock bottom. My son was a killer, my legacy was a lie, and the girl I'd spent my life's final energy to save was being held by the man who pulled the strings. But rock bottom has one advantage. There's nowhere to go but up. You're right about one thing, Julian, I said, stepping closer. I am vintage. I'm from a time when people didn't just record things for the internet. We kept physical files. We kept receipts. The drive, Elmer. The drive is empty. I lied, my voice steady. I sent the real files to the district attorney's office 30 minutes ago from the warehouse landline. What you saw on the live stream was just the appetizer. The main course is currently being printed out in a government office downtown. Thorne's grip on Sophie's hand tightened. You're bluffing. Am I? You know my background, Julian. 38 years in the system. I know every clerk, every assistant, and every investigator in this city. Do you really think I'd walk into a warehouse with the only copy of the evidence of a murder? It was the oldest trick in the social worker's handbook, the imaginary file. When you're dealing with a predatory parent or a violent offender, you make them believe the hammer has already fallen. You make them feel like they're fighting a war that's already been lost. Thorne hesitated. In that split second of doubt, the hospital's intercom system crackled to life. Code Silver. North Tower. Lockdown in effect. Police on site. The sound of boots hit the hallway outside. Heavy, rhythmic, and fast. Thorne looked at the window. The helicopter was lowering its winch. He had a choice. Take the girl and risk a kidnapping charge on top of everything else, or cut his losses and disappear before the tactical team breached the room. This isn't over, Mr. Stanley, Thorne hissed. He let go of Sophie's hand and moved toward the balcony door. You can't kill a brand with a thumb drive. Maybe not, I said. But I can kill a monster with the truth. Thorne disappeared onto the balcony, grabbing the winch line just as the police burst into the room. Detective Miller led the charge, her weapon drawn. "Secure the perimeter," she shouted. I didn't watch the helicopter fly away. I didn't care about Julian Thorne. I dropped to my knees and gathered Sophie into my arms. She buried her face in my neck, her small body racking with sobs. "It's okay," I whispered into her hair. "It's over, Sophie. I've got you." But as Miller knelt down beside us, her face grim, I knew it wasn't over. Not really. "Elmer," she said, her voice low, "we found the well. Maya led us to the back of the property." I looked up, and it's not just Lydia Vance in there, Elmer. My blood turned to ice. "What do you mean?" "The well. It's been used for a long time. There are remains of at least 3 other people in that garden. One of them matches the description of a girl who went missing 5 years ago, a former assistant of Trisha's." The room seemed to tilt. I looked at the empty bed, at the discarded teddy bear, and then at the door where my son's life had once been a polished, gray aesthetic. The truth was finally out, and it was more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. My son hadn't just helped cover up a murder, he had moved into a house that was a slaughterhouse, and he had raised his daughter on top of a graveyard. "We need to get her out of here," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to get her as far away from this city as possible." "We will," Miller said. "But Elmer, there's one more thing. We found a notebook in the guest house, Trisha's private journal, the one she didn't digitize." She handed me a small, black book. I opened it to the last entry, dated 2 days ago. "The old man is getting too close. If he finds the well, we use the final contingency. Dennis doesn't know about the insurance policy. He thinks he's the one in charge. He's the most valuable asset I have as long as he's dead." I stared at the words. Trisha hadn't just been planning to hide Sophie. She had been planning to kill Dennis for the insurance money to fund the next phase of her brand. I looked at the phone in Miller's hand. "Is he still at the precinct?" "He's being transported to the county jail right now," Miller said. "Stop the transport," I barked, standing up. "Now." "She's already set it in motion." But as I spoke, a massive explosion rocked the hospital. The floor buckled, and the sound of twisted metal and shattered glass filled the air. I looked out the window. The police transport van, sitting in the intersection just blocks away, was a ball of orange flame. The reversal was complete. My son was gone. The evidence was out. But the woman who had orchestrated it all was still out there, and she had just erased the only person who could testify against her. I stood in the wreckage of the hospital room, holding my granddaughter, realizing that the revenge I'd planned was no longer about justice. It was about survival. Because Trisha wasn't just an influencer, she was a ghost. And she was coming for us. The roar of the explosion was still vibrating in the hospital's glass panes when the silence hit a heavy, suffocating blanket of soundlessness that felt worse than the blast itself. I stood at the window, my breath fogging the glass, watching the black column of smoke rise from the intersection 3 blocks away. Somewhere in that ball of orange fire was my son, my only child. The boy who had once waited by the window for my car, now reduced to a headline in a corporate assassination. I didn't know it then, but the fire wasn't just meant to kill Dennis. It was meant to cremate the only witness who could connect the CEO of Catalyst to the bodies in the well. Detective Miller was on her radio, her voice a frantic bark of orders, but I barely heard her. I looked down at Sophie, who had crawled under the hospital bed, her hands over her ears, her eyes shut so tight her whole face was wrinkled. She didn't ask what the noise was. In her world, loud noises always meant something was being broken. Usually, it was her. I reached under the bed, not to pull her out, but just to let my hand rest near hers. "I've got you," I whispered, though the words felt like lies. How could I have her when the world was literally exploding around us? The next 6 hours were a chaotic descent into the bowels of the legal system. Because I was a retired DHS officer, and because the live stream had gone viral, the investors couldn't just make me disappear in the lobby, but they could bury me in red tape. By midnight, Sophie and I were in a secure location, a windowless safe house provided by the state police that smelled like stale coffee and old upholstery. Miller sat across from me at a laminate table, her tie undone, her eyes bloodshot. She pushed a folder toward me. The identification came back from the van. It was Dennis. The dental records matched. "I'm sorry, Elmer." I didn't cry. The grief was there, a cold, heavy stone in my stomach, but it was overshadowed by a searing, white-hot clarity. He was a fool, Miller. He thought he was a partner. He was just a pawn they sacrificed to protect the king. "It's not just a king," Miller said, dropping her voice. We ran a deep background on Trisha Parker. "Elmer, the woman doesn't exist. Not before 5 years ago. The social security number she used belongs to a girl who died in a house fire in Georgia in 2018. The degrees, the family history she posted about on her story, it's all fabricated." The hidden truth was finally out. My son hadn't just married a narcissist. He had married a professional identity thief who specialized in harvesting wealthy, lonely men with assets. "She's a life thief," I whispered, the realization chilling my blood. She didn't just want the brand. She wanted the house, the trust funds, the whole structure. And Lydia Vance was the only thing standing in the way of her becoming the perfect Mrs. Stanley. "We found the others in the well," Miller continued, her voice trembling slightly. "The missing assistant, Maya's predecessor, and a man from Seattle, a developer who went missing 3 years ago. His estate was liquidated and funneled into a series of shell companies owned by Julian Thorne. The picture was complete. Trisha was the face, the influencer, who scouted the targets and sanitized the crimes through her digital aesthetic. Thorne was the bank, the one who turned the stolen lives into clean capital. And Dennis? Dennis had been the useful idiot who provided the last name and the legal cover, never realizing he was living in a slaughterhouse until the door was already locked. "Where is she?" I asked. "Vanished," Miller said. "She never went to the precinct. The woman who was arrested? That was a decoy, a girl paid to wear a wig and a designer dress. The real Trisha was never in the cruiser. She's gone, Elmer, and Thorne has high-level lawyers blocking every search warrant we throw at Catalyst." I looked at the thumb drive sitting on the table between us. It was the only thing left. But in this world of deep fakes and corporate fixers, a video was just pixels. I needed something more. I needed a way to pull the ghost out of the machine. I realized then that if I played by the rules I'd followed for 38 years, I would lose. The system was designed to protect people like Thorne. It was built to move slowly, to deliberate, to allow for due process while the monsters changed their names and moved to the next city. I stood up, my joints popping. "I'm taking Sophie." "You can't," Miller said. "You're in protective custody." "No," I said, leaning over the table. "I'm a grandfather with nothing left to lose but a 5-year-old girl." "You can't protect us, Miller. Your van exploded. Your Trisha was a decoy. The only way to win this is to stop being the prey." I walked to the corner of the room where Sophie was curled up on a cot. I picked her up, she was so light, a feather in a storm, and walked toward the door. "Elmer, if you walk out that door, I can't help you legally," Miller warned. "I don't need a lawyer." "Detective," I said, looking back. "I need a carpenter. I'm going to strip the paint off this brand until there's nothing left but the rot." I didn't go back to my apartment. I didn't go to the police. I drove to a storage unit in Tigard that I'd kept for 20 years, a place where I stored the unsolvable files from my DHS days, the ones the state told me to shred. Inside that unit wasn't just paper, it was leverage. During my career, I'd helped a lot of people who lived on the fringes. Informants, hackers, runaways who grew up to be the kind of people you don't find on LinkedIn. I picked up a dusty black rotary phone I'd kept in a crate and dialed a number I'd memorized in 1994. "It's Stanley," I said when a gravelly voice answered. "I need to unmake a ghost." The plan was simple, but it required me to do the one thing I'd spent my life preventing. I was going to use Sophie as bait. Not physically, I would never put her in harm's way again, but I was going to use her image. I knew Trisha's weakness. It wasn't money, and it wasn't power. It was relevance. She couldn't exist if people weren't watching. She was a creature made of likes, comments, and engagement. If I could poison the brand she had spent 5 years building, she would come out of the shadows to defend it. She wouldn't be able to help herself. I spent the next 48 hours in that storage unit with a young man named Leo, a former foster kid I'd pulled out of a bad situation 2 decades ago who was now a digital forensic specialist. We didn't just upload the murder video. We did something much more surgical. We created a new brand. We called it The Real Sophie. We posted photos of the attic, not the sanitized, aesthetic version Trisha would have wanted, but the raw, ugly truth, the stained mattress, the plastic bowl, the padlock. And then, we posted the videos of Sophie not crying, but learning to laugh. We showed her planting flowers. We showed her eating a grape. And under every post, we tagged every single one of Trisha's sponsors. We tagged the Intentional Living magazines. We tagged the mommy influencer boards. We created a tidal wave of revulsion that moved faster than any legal injunction Thorne could file. I didn't know it yet, but the reversal was working better than I'd hoped. The ghost was starting to scream. By the 3rd day, the Catalyst Group's stock had dropped 12%. Sponsors were fleeing like rats from a sinking ship. The world was no longer looking at Trisha's clean girl aesthetic. They were looking at the deep garden and the monster who tended it. My phone rang at 3 a.m. It wasn't a restricted number this time. It was a video call. I answered. The screen stayed dark for a moment, and then a face appeared. It was Trisha. She was in a hotel room somewhere, the lighting harsh and unflattering. Her hair was a mess, and the cold, polished mask was gone. She looked old. She looked desperate. "You're ruining it, Elmer," she hissed, her voice trembling. 5 years. I spent 5 years building this. I killed for this. You think you can just take it away with some heart-tugging photos of that brat? I'm not taking it away, Trisha, I said, my voice calm, almost bored. I'm just showing the grain underneath the paint. You're not an influencer. You're a grave digger. Stop the posts, she pleaded. Then her face hardened into something truly demonic. Stop them, or I'll tell the world where Lydia really came from. I'll tell them what Dennis did before I even met him. You think your son was an innocent? He was looking for a way out long before I arrived. He's dead, Trisha, you killed him. Your threats are just noise. I'm coming for her, Elmer, she whispered. I'm coming to finish the final resolution, and this time there won't be any witnesses. She hung up. I looked at the screen, a grim satisfaction settling over me. I'd done it. I'd pulled the ghost out of the machine. She was coming for us. She was emotional, she was erratic, and she was heading for the one place I wanted her to be. I looked at Leo, who was monitoring the GPS on her call signal. Did you get it? She's in a motel in Gresham, Leo said. Moving west. She's heading for the house on Cedar Hill Drive, Elmer. She thinks you're there with Sophie. Good, I said, standing up and grabbing my coat. I wasn't a social worker anymore. I wasn't a grieving father. I was a man who had spent 38 years learning how to build a cage for a predator, and I had just built the most beautiful cage of all. But as I drove toward the house on Cedar Hill Drive, leaving Sophie safe with Mrs. Patterson and 3 off-duty cops I'd hired with my life savings, I realized there was one final twist I hadn't accounted for. Trisha wasn't coming alone, and the man driving her car wasn't a fixer or a lawyer. The silhouette in the passenger seat, visible for just a second in a traffic cam shot Leo pulled up, was someone I recognized, someone who shouldn't have been alive. The final resolution wasn't just a video title, it was a promise. And as I pulled into the driveway of the house that had become a graveyard, I realized that the dead weren't finished with the Stanley family yet. I stepped out of my truck, the crowbar heavy in my hand, and looked at the front door. The police tape was torn. The lights were on. It was time for the final cleaning. The house on Cedar Hill Drive didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a cold, hollowed-out monument to a life that never truly existed. I stepped through the front door, the wood creaking under my boots. The air was stale, smelling of old dust and the lingering synthetic scent of Trisha's expensive candles. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need to. I knew every inch of this place, every shadow where a secret had been tucked away. I walked straight through the kitchen, past the marble island where I'd watched the detectives work, and headed for the backyard. The deep garden was bathed in the pale, sickly light of a waning moon, The decorative stone fountain, the one Trisha had told Sophie was a home for fairies, stood in the center of the lawn, looking like a gravestone. I sat on a stone bench nearby, the crowbar resting across my knees. My heart was a steady, heavy drum in my chest. I didn't know it yet, but the person who was about to walk through those gates wasn't coming to negotiate. They were coming to settle a debt that had been written in blood 5 years ago. The sound of a car engine cut through the silence of the suburban night. High beams swept across the fence, casting long, skeletal shadows against the house. I watched as a silver sedan pulled into the driveway, the tires crunching on the gravel. The engine died, and for a long moment, there was only the sound of the rain dripping from the eaves. Then, the car doors opened. Trisha stepped out first. She was wearing a dark trench coat, her hair matted by the rain, her face a pale mask of exhaustion and rage. She looked nothing like the lifestyle curator the world knew. She looked like a woman who had been stripped of her skin, but it was the person who stepped out of the passenger side that made my breath catch in my throat. He was hunched over, his arm in a makeshift sling, his face a mosaic of bandages and raw, red burns. It was Dennis, my son. He hadn't died in the explosion. He had jumped, or he had been thrown clear, but he was alive. And as he limped toward me, following Trisha like a wounded dog, I realized the horrifying truth. He wasn't her prisoner. He was still her partner. Even after she had tried to blow him into 1,000 pieces to collect an insurance policy, he had crawled back to her. The manipulation was so deep, the rot so total, that he couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't her shadow. "Give it to me, Elmer," Trisha said, her voice a jagged whisper. She was holding a small silver handgun, her knuckles white as she pointed it at my chest. "The drive, the backup, everything. Give it to me, and we leave. We go to the border. You never have to see us again." "You tried to kill him, Trisha," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from miles away. I looked at Dennis, whose eyes were glazed with pain and something that looked like worship. "She put a bomb in your transport van, Dennis. She was going to trade your life for a brand refresh. How can you stand next to her?" Dennis didn't look at me. He looked at the fountain. "She said it was the investors. Dad, she said Thorne did it. She saved me. She found me in the wreckage." "She is the wreckage, Dennis," I said. I stood up slowly, the crowbar heavy in my hand. "I'm not giving you the drive. I've already sent the files to every major news outlet in the Pacific Northwest. By tomorrow morning, there won't be a place on this earth where your brand isn't synonymous with murder." Trisha's face contorted into something subhuman. "Then you're just another distraction that needs to be minimized." She raised the gun, but before she could pull the trigger, a sound erupted from the back of the property. It wasn't the police. It wasn't a siren. It was the low, grinding sound of a motor. I looked past them to the content studio. The doors were wide open, and Maya, the assistant, was standing there. But she wasn't alone. She was holding a tablet, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. "It's already live, Trisha," Maya shouted, her voice echoing through the yard. "The final resolution. I didn't just record the woods, I recorded the bedroom. I recorded the kitchen. I've been recording you for 3 months. Trisha spun around, the gun wavering. In that split second of distraction, I didn't use the crowbar. I used the truth. "The well, Dennis," I said, pointing to the fountain. "Tell her what's in the well. Tell her you know why the fairies don't come here anymore." Dennis looked at the stone fountain, and for the first time in years, the mask of the successful sales manager cracked. He looked at the woman he had sacrificed his soul for, and then he looked at the ground where Lydia Vance lay. The weight of 5 years of silence, of 5 years of watching his daughter rot in an attic while he played house, finally broke him. "I can't do it anymore, Trish," Dennis whispered. "She's in there. Lydia is in there. And the others. I can still hear them when the wind blows through the vents. I hear them screaming." "Shut up, Dennis," Trisha shrieked, turning the gun back on him. "Shut up or I'll finish what the investors started." What happened next changed everything. Dennis didn't run. He didn't plead. He stepped toward her, his uninjured hand reaching out not for the gun, but for her throat. It wasn't an act of heroism. It was an act of mutual destruction. They collided like 2 dying stars, tumbling across the wet grass, the gun firing once, twice, the bullets disappearing into the night air. I moved toward them, but I was too late. They hit the stone lip of the fountain with a sickening thud. The decorative stonework, already weakened by years of neglect and the weight of the secrets it held, gave way. The fountain collapsed inward, the heavy center pillar toppling into the dark, yawning mouth of the old well. And they went with it. A cloud of dust and ancient, stagnant water rose from the hole. I ran to the edge, the crowbar clattering to the grass. I looked down into the darkness, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. They were gone. The lifestyle curator and her asset were buried in the very garden they had used to hide their sins. They were lying in the dark, surrounded by the ghosts of the women they had unmade. The final resolution wasn't a video, it was a grave. The sirens finally arrived then, a cacophony of light and sound that filled the suburban street. I sat on the grass, the rain washing the dust from my face. Detective Miller was the first one through the gate. She didn't say anything. She just looked at the collapsed fountain and then at me. She put a hand on my shoulder, a gesture of silent, heavy understanding. The aftermath. The excavation of the Cedar Hill property took 3 weeks. They found Lydia, they found the assistant, and they found the developer from Seattle. The Catalyst Group didn't survive the scandal. Julian Thorne was indicted on 12 counts of conspiracy, money laundering, and accessory to murder. He took a plea deal that would see him die in a federal prison, but he never gave up the names of the investors. Some shadows are too deep for the law to reach. But for me, the victory wasn't in the headlines. It wasn't in the stock market crash or the prison sentences. It was in the quiet. 2 years later, I sat on the porch of a small cabin in the Oregon woods, far away from the gray aesthetic of the suburbs. The air here smelled of pine and damp earth, real smells, honest smells. Inside the cabin, I could hear the sound of a pencil scratching against paper. Sophie came out a moment later, holding a sketchbook. She was 7 now. Her hair was long and healthy, shining in the afternoon sun. She had gained weight, her cheeks full and rosy, her eyes bright with a curiosity that had once been buried in an attic wardrobe. She sat down next to me and opened the book. "Look, Grandpa," she said, pointing to a drawing of a massive ancient oak tree. "I drew the roots. You said the roots are the most important part because they hold the truth of the tree." I looked at her drawing. It was beautiful, not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. It was an expression of a girl who was no longer a secret, no longer a distraction. "It's perfect, Sophie," I said, pulling her into a side hug. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "Grandpa, do you think the people in the garden are happy now?" I looked out at the woods, at the way the light filtered through the branches. I thought about Lydia. I thought about the one-eyed bear that now sat on Sophie's nightstand. "I think they're at peace, sweetheart," I said, "because the truth is out, and the truth is the only thing that can ever really set you free." Sophie nodded, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. I sat there, watching the sun dip below the horizon, feeling the weight of the last few years finally lift. My son was a memory I had to carry, a ghost of a man who had chosen the wrong light. But Sophie was a future I had earned. I had spent 38 years as a social worker, trying to save the world one file at a time. I hadn't saved the world. I'd barely saved my own family. But as I looked at my granddaughter, I realized that sometimes, saving one person is the same thing as saving everything. The Stanley brand was dead. The furniture was sold. The house was gone. But the grain of the wood, the raw, honest truth of who we were, remained. And that was enough. As the first stars began to appear over the Cascades, I realized that the cleaning was finally, truly finished. There were no more secrets in the attic. There were no more bodies in the garden. There was only the sound of the wind in the trees and the quiet breathing of a child who knew she was loved. And in the end, that was the only aesthetic that ever mattered.